Welcome to New Stripe City, a podcast for diehard Bengals fans. I'm your host, Ace Boogie, and we finally have my co-host back, G. And now she's back. G, say hello to everybody.
Hey guys, I'm back. It's been a while.
All right, so yes, it has, and that's completely my fault. Obviously, we've had some technical difficulties and everything, but obviously, some exciting things have happened, transpired. So we're going to touch on most of all of them. We're going to touch on Vontaze Burfict. We'll also touch on the 53-man roster, William Jackson III, amongst some other things as well. So the first thing that I want to talk to G about, since we didn't get her input on it, was the Vontaze Burfict suspension. As we know, he was suspended for what they call a illegal hit, which was pretty stupid. But obviously, he was suspended initially 5 games. It was reduced to 3 games. G, what are your thoughts on the Vontaze Burfict suspension and what kind of impact it'll have on the Bengals?
I hate that it was even a suspension anyway, because, like you said, the illegal hit, it was barely there. But unfortunately, he just has this Ndamukong Suh thing going on right now that's following him. So, they're going to call it whatever, just be based on his history. And I'm happy it was reduced to 3 games. I wish it wasn't any games at all, because I think it is going to affect our defense for those first 3 weeks. He's a major part of our defense. And, yeah, we're going to miss him for 3 weeks, just like we usually do whenever, he's been hurt a few times. When he's off the field, there's a difference in our defensive play.
Right. I think you hit that right on the head. Obviously, like you said, he's the heart of the defense. So it's going to be hard to get by without him. Hopefully the Bengals can manage. Hopefully they have a pretty good plan in place. But another blow that we were dealt was John Ross being injured. He had an injury to his knee. It seems like it was a knee sprain. He's expected to be out possibly 3 to 4 weeks. What are your thoughts on John Ross's injury and, just John Ross as a whole? Does this prove that the pick was somewhat risky, or what are your thoughts? Was it just a normal injury, or can you elaborate on that?
It definitely was, I think, a risky draft pick anyway. I think he's a great athlete. We all know what he can do. But again, it's the injuries, and we also knew his injury history. And now to hear that his knee is sprained, I think we were talking before the show, and you said that he's had a torn ACL on one knee, a torn MCL on the other knee. So his knees aren't necessarily healthy. And to start off the season with a knee injury, like that's just not a good look for us right now. And I really hope that after those 4 weeks, he's back 100% and we get to see John Ross, because he did have a nice play during the Colts game. But I don't know. I don't like it. It's not a good feeling.
Right. I think you're definitely right. Go ahead.
For future, of course, your players get injured here and there, and, players miss 3 to 4 weeks, and that's fine. But as far as his history and our future with him, it's not a good feeling.
I totally agree. Honestly, I know we sat on here and we talked about the Ross pick, and we never had a problem with his talent. And I don't think that's ever been the case with John Ross. And it seemed like a lot of people were just like, you guys are against Ross or anything. To me, it was always with the medical, and it was with those knees and the risk of a top 10 pick. If John Ross would have been the 21st pick or even the 15th pick in the draft, it really wouldn't have been that huge of a deal to me. But when you have a top 10 pick, when you haven't picked in the top 10 since A.J. Green, you can't take that big of a risk with a guy medically in selecting him. And, I understand it. And the way that the draft kind of fell, it made sense. But the medical was the entire thing there. And you never want to have a guy who, has knee injuries going all the way back to college, and then the first injury in the NFL deals with his knee. To me, I had no problem with the shoulder. I had no problem if this were to be an ankle injury or something like that. But the fact that it's the knee again just scares me. And a lot of people are saying that people are overreacting. Well, this is the thing that you have to consider. John Ross only played in 2 games, 2 preseason games. He set out for the majority of the offseason, obviously nursing his shoulder injury, getting ready to come back. And, as soon as the guy steps on the field, the 3rd snap he's taken, he got hurt. He tweaks his knee. So to me, that's definitely a cause for concern. I don't think – now the impact of it, I don't think we'll really miss him too much from the standpoint of us having such a deep wide receiver core, but it definitely gives you some cause for concern because I hear guys out there saying, injuries happen in football, and yes, that's true. And there was a certain analyst in Cincinnati that said he didn't hear anybody crying when Carl Lawson, I guess, had his shoulder injury. This is the thing. We all knew about Carl Lawson and the fact that he has been injury prone and has suffered those injuries. That was the reason that he fell to the fourth round.
Right.
And I mean, you can't compare a top 10 pick to the fourth round. It's not even in the same ballpark. It's not even in the same, like, you can't even, that's almost pretty laughable. So, of course, people are going to be upset when a top 10 pick could possibly be hurt. And another argument that's being made is, not only has John Ross been hurt, but so has Corey Davis and so has Mike Williams. And I understand that. That's very valid. I also I think that Mike Williams' injury is more long-term because I believe it's a back injury. But this is the thing. Mike Williams and Corey Davis never had pre-existing injuries. John Ross has.
Right.
So that's the only thing there. Hopefully he can bounce back from this and things will be okay. But I was more so worried too as well because our medical staff does not have the best history when it comes to knee injuries. I mean, did everybody forget about Antonio Bryant? I mean, come on now. We signed the guy like never played. And we ended up cutting him like the same season. This is that same staff. This is why when people were like, "Oh, the Bengals staff cleared John Ross. He's good." I'm like, "Nah, bro. Nah, I don't know about
2
that."
more weeks.
Right, exactly. You got 2 more weeks. So, hopefully, I'm glad that we dodged a bullet that it wasn't an ACL tear, but, with this knee sprain, hopefully they're able to get him back and we don't have to rush him. And I think we'll be fine without him. He definitely added that other dimension that we didn't have, and we got to kind of see that with that reverse and some of those trick plays and things of that nature. But hopefully, when he does get back, we're actually able to keep him for the season. I don't think that we also will struggle too much just because we will finally have Tyler Eifert and A.J. Green on the field at the same time. So that's still going to be dynamic there. You also have – right, exactly. That's the thing. It's like majority of our weapons just have to be durable. A.J. is one of my favorite players, but I'll be the first to tell you he's not the most durable player himself. So hopefully him, Eifert – I mean, goodness, it's almost like you're praying for a miracle for all of these guys to actually be on the field at the same time. And hopefully we'll get to see that this year. But you've got other weapons out there like Gio, Joe Mixon,
right?
Tyler Eifert, Tyler Boyd. So we should be good. Piggybacking off of that, obviously, I talked about some of the depth. The Bengals made their final cuts and they made their final roster decisions. There were definitely some surprises. But first, what I'm going to do for some of our viewers out there who may not have been able to see the final depth chart, I'm just going to do a quick rundown of it. So with the quarterbacks, the Bengals decided to keep 3, Andy Dalton, A.J. McCarron, Jeff Driscoll. With the wide receivers, we've been saying on this show for a while that we saw them keeping 7. That's exactly what they did. They kept A.J. Green, Tyler Boyd, Brandon LaFell, Alex Erickson, Cody Cord, John Ross, and Josh Malone. With the running backs, we saw some big surprises there. They only kept 3. The Bengals normally keep 4. They kept Giovanni Bernard, Jeremy Hill, and, of course, Joe Mixon. With the tight ends, we also saw a big surprise here. No surprises with them keeping Tyler Eifert, Ryan Hewitt, Tyler Croft, and C.J. Uzoma, but they ended up keeping a rookie, undrafted rookie, I believe, Cethan Carter. That was somewhat shocking there. On the offensive line, it seems like they decided to go away with the veteran Eric Winston. They kept Andre Smith, Clint Bowling, Russell Bodon, Jake Fisher, Cedric Ogbuehi, of course, T.J. Johnson, Christian Westerman, Trey Hopkins, and Alex Redmond. They actually did decide to cut, I believe, a 5th-round pick in J.J. Dillman, who was claimed by the Rams. The defensive line, not totally a huge surprise here. Will Clark was cut. They decided to keep Pat Sims. Michael Johnson managed to stay on the roster because he was able to effectively rush from the inside. Carlos Dunlap, Geno Atkins, we already knew that those were locks. Chris Smith, the pass rusher that was traded from the Jaguars to the Bengals, managed to make the roster. He definitely had a great preseason, so not shocking there either. We also have Andrew Billings, Jordan Willis, who tore up this preseason, and Ryan Glasgow. So Deshaun Williams also did not make the roster. A big cut there. Moving on to the linebackers. There was one surprise there for me, and obviously Vontaze Burfict is suspended. He's not going to count on the roster for the first week, but they decided to keep Vincent Ray, Kevin Minter, Nick Vigil, Carl Lawson, who will bounce between the defensive line and the linebacker position, Jordan Evans, and the biggest surprise, undrafted rookie Hardy Nickerson. They also decided to do away with and cut Paul Dawson. So a third rounder from, I believe, 2 years ago, which makes that 2015 draft class look even more like a bust right now. In the secondary, no big surprises there with Adam Jones being suspended for the first game. They kept Drake Kirkpatrick, George Iloka, Sean Williams, Darquez Denard, who was slightly overpaid, slightly. Josh Shaw, who's going to bounce between cornerback and safety. Darren Smith, William Jackson, Clayton Fedulum, and Kivari Russell. And obviously, last but not least, probably one of the most talked about cuts was the Bengals electing to cut Jake Elliott. So they decided to keep Kevin Huber, Clark Harris, and Randy Bullock, to a lot of people's chagrin. So, G, I'm going to put you on the spot here. What were your thoughts on the Bengals deciding to go with the kicker with cutting, I guess, Jake Elliott, who I believe wasn't anywhere near as statistically accurate as Randy Bullock was, but a lot of people felt like he had more potential.
Well, I mean, I think it's a hard decision. It can go either way. It's either you're going to go with the rookie with the potential, or you're going to go with the guy with the history who has a pretty good track record. And I'm actually not mad at going with the guy who has a pretty good track record, just because of what we've seen kind of with teams like Tampa Bay. You have that high draft pick for a kicker who hasn't produced anything in 2 years, and you did that just based on potential. So I think potential could come back and bite you in the butt faster than your veteran who's kind of proven himself to be pretty decent. So I'm not
right.
I mean, I hate that we wasted a draft pick. Yeah, that sucks, but I think that was the better decision for the kicker.
Right, I totally agree. And before I forget, the Bengals also traded Ben Wookery to the Cowboys for, I believe, an undisclosed pick. So before just letting him go, they actually gathered another draft pick for the next year. And then they also traded Marquise Flowers to the Patriots for a 7th-round pick. So they still acquired two later picks. But I think you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, when you have a guy that's been, nearly perfect throughout the preseason, I mean, yeah, you have a guy in Jake Elliott that has potential, but he also has the potential to go out there and miss kicks too at the same time. So for the Bengals to go out and make this decision, I think that they made the smartest decision, because why not go with the guy who made the most field goals, who didn't have many misses, who was a veteran who's, kicked in the NFL for a while. Obviously, a lot of Bengals fans are still upset that he missed the field goal against the Texans, which I totally agree. That was definitely a bad miss for us. But from what I hear with the special teams coach, Darren Simmons, apparently there was also an issue with like the placeholder for that right there. So I'm not too surprised that they decided to make this move. And, who knows? I mean, if Jake Elliott does go through waivers, they can keep him on the practice squad. So if things don't work out, they can replace him later. But I think that Bullock, you have to go with him. I mean, he has a hot foot. He's a veteran. I mean, it's not like you went back and kept Mike Nugent or something like that. So
right.
I definitely understand, because like you said, G, we would have loved to have saved that draft pick, but who knows? I mean, you can draft a guy, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to work out. And the fact that it's not like we're in the Tampa Bay boat that you talked about earlier, where it was a guy that we drafted in the 2nd round or the 3rd round. I mean, obviously a 5th-round pick is somewhat valuable, but at the same time, when you get to the 5th round, it's hit or miss for sure.
Right.
Were there any other surprises? For me, I think that the 3 running back thing was somewhat of a surprise, only because they usually keep 4, and usually that 4th guy is a special teamer. I really don't see Jeremy Hill, Giovanni Bernard, or Joe Mixon playing on special teams. So what were your thoughts with them only keeping 3 there?
Well, yeah, I definitely think it was interesting. But it also kind of makes me wonder the direction now that the team is looking for their offense. It's kind of like if we're keeping 7 receivers and we're keeping all these tight ends, obviously we're looking to be more of a throwing team than we are dependent on our running game, which we have been more so in the past. But then it's also like, but now you have Joe Mixon, who maybe they will experiment with maybe putting him on special teams because you're right, we do have the history of keeping that back on the roster because he does special teams. But I don't know. I think it kind of shows us what direction the offense is trying to move into now, more of a passing game than your running game.
I think that you're right on that. And a surprise move, and I think someone here in the chat, Mr. Bees, said that Brandon Wilson should have stayed because of his combination as a running back and safety plus special teams. I tend to agree with him on that, but the reason I believe that Brandon Wilson was cut was because he only got to play in one game. So he was hurt the majority of camp. So, I mean, technically, yeah, there was a fit for him in several different areas, but the fact that he was actually cut, in my opinion, just made sense. And it looks like, we're getting some instant updates here. So you broke the rules, Spoon, said that the Bengals actually, this is some breaking news. I guess we're doing hot takes now. The Bengals just released their preseason squad. It looks like Brandon Wilson did make it, and Jake Elliott did make it. So a lot of people were worried that Jake Elliott wouldn't make it because people thought that he was one of the top kickers from the draft. But obviously, they saw him miss some of those field goals as we did in the preseason, and it looks like he's on that roster.
Oh, well, that's good for you, Jake.
Right. Kenny Moore says that Joe Mixon is way too valuable to put on special teams. I think, like G said, he could play special teams if it's from a return standpoint. A lot of people forget that he also can return kicks too. So, I mean, depending on what's going to happen with Erickson or if there's an injury, you could see Joe Mixon back there. I don't think he'll be a gunner, but I think there is a possibility that he could return kicks if need be. He definitely is pretty valuable, but you have to think about it. You have 3 valuable running backs in Gio, Jeremy Hill, and Joe Mixon. So one of them will have to do something, but maybe they'll lean on maybe a Alex Erickson or one of these safeties to kind of pick up the slack where Cedric Pierman normally would play at. G, what are your thoughts on them keeping Hardy Nickerson from the linebacker core? He was an undrafted free agent. He actually, I believe his father was a famous linebacker, and I also believe that there was some kind of tie between Marvin Lewis and his father. But it comes as a surprise because, the Bengals decided to trade away Marquise Flowers, and then they also decided to cut Paul Dawson, who was a high draft pick for them. What do you think was their reasoning behind keeping Hardison on this final roster?
Well, I didn't know all this background information about his ties to the team. I like to think that wouldn't be the reason that they kept him, but I guess I don't know who else you would have kept. Who else do you think would have stayed on the squad besides him? Who would you have kept in his position if you would have let him go?
That's a good question because the Bengals were kind of put into a hard place because originally I had them keeping 6 linebackers, but that was before Vontaze was actually suspended. So with him not being on there, I think you're right. I mean, I would think possibly Paul Dawson, but Paul Dawson was hurt the entire preseason, and Hardy Nickerson definitely did step in. And from what I heard from reports, it seemed like he was pretty smart in terms of knowing what the plays were. And I know from talking to a couple of my guys that know some of the Bengals players, that was the whole knock on Paul Dawson. Wasn't that he didn't have the physical ability. It was that he didn't display the mental fortitude or the mental capacity to actually retain what, I guess, key plays that the defense was running and how to have guys set up and make sure that they were in the right place. So from what I heard, it was a lot of mental lapses with him. Like he didn't know the defense. He didn't know what plays to call. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're Ray Lewis. If you don't know what you're doing on a play,
that's big.
You're a liability.
That's
big. You're a liability. So, and it looks like Mr. B says that Brandon Bell played way better. I didn't really look at it that close, but go ahead, G.
No, I was going to say, if it comes down to things like that, I don't, as us just watching the game, we wouldn't know what these linebackers are taking in and not taking in as far as play calling and stuff like that. But hearing that behind the scenes, I think that's a major, like, if that's something, that's a major reason why you would keep one person over another.
Right.
Again, he's young. We talked about it before the show. I think we were talking about it earlier. We're keeping these younger players now and not holding on to as many veterans. So, train them up, keep them young, and maybe eventually he will be a standout linebacker.
Okay, so we have our little hot take breaking news here. I actually pulled up the Bengals preseason roster. This just came out 8 minutes ago. Brandon Bell, the linebacker that I think one of our followers commented on, it looks like he made the practice squad. Jake Elliott, as we talked about earlier. Kent Perkins, a tackle. It looks like a rookie from Texas. Josh Tupou, I believe he was like a nose tackle. Kermit Whitfield, my boy from Florida State. Glad to see that he made the roster. Deshaun Williams comes back to the Bengals on the practice squad. That was a big surprising cut there. And it looks like Jarvion Williams, a running back from Texas San Antonio, makes it, and Brandon Wilson. So that's pretty interesting. It looks like the Bengals actually came out pretty good with their practice squad. So no huge surprises there. Just for a second, I want to touch on Kermit Whitfield. And the only reason I'm touching on him is because obviously, like, I'm getting ready to leave Tallahassee, but I've been down here for a while. I actually met Kermit Whitfield a couple of years ago. And a lot of people, if you ever watched when Florida State won the 2013 national championship, there was a player that took a kick return that had like a 100-yard kick return. That player was Kermit Whitfield. The thing that was interesting to me, he definitely made some plays in preseason from the receiver position, but it was interesting to me that we never put him back as a kick returner. And it's like this guy had a 100-yard kick return touchdown in the national championship, 3 years ago. Why wouldn't you do that? I think that he's somewhat in the mode of a guy like Andrew Hawkins. He's really short. He's like 5'8". But he's really fast. And so I think that that's going to end up being a big move for the Bengals going forward. And I think he's going to be one of those guys, just like Baby Hawk, that has to kind of work his way up from the practice squad, but could end up making the roster if injuries do occur and fill that niche that we had that Baby Hawk has. Seems like Alex Erickson is kind of filling that niche right now, but he could be a guy later on down the line that could end up stepping in there. But back to, I guess, the regular roster. Will Clark was cut. We talked a lot about the defensive line. So Will Clark was cut. Deshaun Williams was cut. Now, since we know that Deshaun is on the practice squad, what were your thoughts about us cutting Will Clark? Because I believe Will Clark was a third-round draft pick from 2014, I believe. So what were your thoughts on that, G?
That was a hard one because, like you said, they kept Michael Johnson. So we've talked about Michael Johnson before, and I know that I really do like Michael Johnson. So that was an interesting move for them to hold on to him. But I think that you're right. Like, he stepped up. He showed that he could do what we've expected him to do. Maybe not to the level that we've seen him at his best, but enough to where he can hold on to his spot more consistently than Will Clark has been. So he played for his spot. That's what I think happened there. Definitely two talented players at their positions, but I think he just got outplayed.
I think you're right. I mean, when it comes to Will Clark, what did Will Clark ever do? I mean, honestly,
consistency. Like, he had those one or two nice plays that we can remember, but he wasn't as consistent as Michael Johnson. I always want to say Michael Jackson. Michael Johnson was in the past, and what we know he's capable of being.
I totally agree. I mean, I wasn't really crying over us cutting Will Clark. I mean, the guy had plenty of chances. I'm just glad that the memory of him and Marcus Hunt is gone. Like, the Bengals didn't wait to finally, cut him. They didn't keep them too long. I mean, to me, that just signifies the fact that the Bengals realize now that, the edge rushers, the edge rushers that they seem to like in the past that were the 6'6" guys, 280 pounds, not all of them are working out. And it's time to switch up and get some of these leaner guys. So I think that just kind of signified, I guess, to the rest of the fan base and the coaching staff that, hey, it's time to start getting some edge rushers that actually get to the quarterback instead of these big guys that are like
For
run
the second
stoppers that
player.
don't end up doing anything. They end up with 4 sacks on the season. So since we've touched on the roster, I think we've talked about most of that. With the cornerback position, obviously Pac-Man is going to be suspended that first game. In my opinion, I think that William Jackson III is probably scheduled to start. What are your thoughts on William Jackson III starting opening day in place of Pac-Man against the Ravens?
I think it's a good team for him to open up against. Because right now, off the top of my head, I'm not real sure who they have receiving out there in Baltimore. So, I mean, in a sense, it's kind of a good way to have a start in the NFL. It's not like he's playing some like the Steelers and you got Antonio Brown and Martavius Bryant and all them out there. I think it's a pretty good game for him to start in, and I think he will be pretty successful in this game.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Pro Football Focus had some kind of stat where he was, one of the top corners in coverage this preseason. And I mean, you drafted the guy in the first round for a reason last year, so why not throw him out there, see what he can do? A good friend of mine's Moody. We definitely are William Jackson III fans, and we feel like one of the reasons that gives him an advantage over Darqueze Dennard is his speed. Because once Darqueze Dennard makes a mistake, he doesn't have the recovery speed to catch back up with someone. So William Jackson III, he's a pretty good coverage corner, but if he does make a mistake, he can always catch up to someone or try to correct it with his speed. And I think why not throw this guy out there? I mean, you've got Drake Kirkpatrick out there. And I mean, honestly, by default, Darqueze Dennard is going to play anyway, and he's going to start. He'll probably start in the slot, but you'll have to. Yeah, I'm not a Darqueze Dennard fan, man. I'm really not a Darqueze Dennard fan, and it's crazy because I started out as one because he had all of these accolades from college. It was this whole no-fly zone thing, and it's like as soon as he got into the league, it just was gone. It was gone. It was like the dude was either injured or he was just getting toasted by somebody in the league. So I almost had an aneurysm when they decided to exercise his option for next year. It was pretty ridiculous. It was like, are you serious? So we're just gonna give him $8 million. Okay, cool. So this guy sucks. So we're gonna give him $8 million. All right, cool. He plays cornerback. He was a first round corner. So apparently that qualifies you to get $8 million a year. It's pretty ridiculous. I wish I had job security like him.
Oh my god.
But let me see. Let's check out some of these comments. Kenny has tried to say Gina Michael Johnson is washed up, and in G's defense, we have both talked about that Michael Johnson should get cut. Honestly, I really only think that Michael Johnson made this roster because they switched him to defensive tackle, and when he was in at defensive tackle, I don't know if it was the fact that Chris Smith was helping him out or whatever it was, but he was getting some pressure on the quarterback. So.
Well, is it? I mean, he want to hold on to Will Clark then?
Will Clark was a bum. Let's just keep it real. That's true. I mean, yeah. I mean, like you said, it came down to Michael Johnson, Will Clark, or Marcus Hardison. Those other two guys, we saw nothing from them. All right. I mean, you might as well just keep Michael Johnson, bro. I understand we totally are not Michael Johnson fans either. I think that Jordan Willis and Chris Smith should start over him. I think that he's definitely a rotational player. And I think, G, you said that he was a rotational player now. We really need to use him there. So, in her defense, we just don't get it twisted. We are not Michael Johnson.
It's not, yeah, don't think that he's going to start like all 16 games and be like our go-to guy. No. Like, nah, he's definitely going to be rotated in.
Right, he's definitely going to be rotated in. So I was just having some fun because I think that the 2015 draft class for us was one of the worst in recent history. So I was going down here and looking at it, and 1, 2, 3 guys from that class have already been cut. If you guys don't remember, that draft class consisted of Cedric Ogbuehi. The jury is definitely still out on him, even though he played pretty decent in the preseason. Jake Fisher, I think that was a pretty solid pick. Tyler Kroft, I was never sold on Tyler Kroft from day one. And I think the fact that they had to keep Ethan Carter on this roster means that they don't really think that he's that good either. Josh Shaw, I think, might be the best player out of this draft class. CJ Uzoma and Darren Smith. Those are the only guys from that class. And I mean, unless it's by default, how many of those guys really like came through to actually be a viable starter on this team? I feel like Jake Fisher and Obwehi are just really starting because we really don't have another choice or another option.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is a bad roster.
Um,
Let's get that bad taste out of our mouth with that draft, and let's talk about the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, the Baltimore Ravens are going to be our Week 1 game. The Bengals, I believe, are like 5-1. It's something like that. We just have a crazy winning streak against them. I think they only beat us last year, and I mean, I think that was early on. I can't really remember, but what are your thoughts going into this game? Obviously, Burfict is going to be out. John Ross is going to be out. Do you think the Bengals will struggle? It seems like Joe Flacco it will be the starter. But what are your thoughts going forward with this Ravens game?
um, I don't really have any major concerns for us against the Ravens. I think that we'll probably be successful against them. My only concern for us going into Week 1 is probably like our ability to score in the end zone. Like we can kick. I mean, we can kick field goals all day. That's fine, but field goals aren't going to win us those games. And I think that's the only concern I have. Like we could go in there and beat the Ravens, but we got to score touchdowns. Like we can't get away with just field goals for the whole game. But other than that, I don't see them as being a really big threat for us Week 1.
I totally agree. I think we kind of have the Ravens number. It's weird because the whole way that the AFC North goes is we kind of have the Ravens number and the Ravens kind of have the Steelers number, and I think that you'll see a lot of that continue. And you're bringing in a guy like Joe Flacco that hasn't even played the entire preseason. I don't think that Joe Flacco is that great of a quarterback either. And it's nothing against the Ravens. The guy won a Super Bowl, but what has the guy done after that? I mean, he's not. He had a very average year last year, and honestly, he's
So
not. I honestly think that Andy Dalton, outside of the Super Bowl win, I think that Andy Dalton is a better quarterback than him. And I don't even
absolutely.
think that it's really close. But you're bringing in Joe Flacco, and I mean, he's okay. You still don't really you signed Jeremy Maclin, who I think will definitely contribute to their offense. But their offensive line is a weakness, and it seems like the
The
Bengals have
running
upgraded their running back is actually they have two of them, I believe. It's probably going to be a mix of Terrence West and Danny Woodhead. They did bring in Danny Woodhead, who I think will be a pretty good sleeper for them this year. They had Kenneth Dixon. I believe Kenneth Dixon got hurt. The Ravens, I don't know what's up with their strength and conditioning staff, but they need to like lay off the entire staff because they have like 10 players who've already like been assigned to the IR. The season hasn't even started yet, so I don't know what
like
they have going on there. But
they usually have, but you're right though. They have a history though of a lot of injuries to their players. Like they were really beat up last year too. Um,
right, so I don't know if they're like not paying doctors or something. I don't know what it is or their training staff. But if I'm their owner, the problem isn't your roster. The problem is the staff, the
right.
strength and conditioning staff. You just need to do a whole makeover with that. But yeah, I don't like you said. I really don't see it being that tough of a game. With their offensive line, you have a mediocre quarterback, and then the offensive line isn't as strong as it usually is for the Ravens. So I think that the Bengals will get some pressure in there on them. And then on offense, it's basically just Jeremy Maclin and possibly Danny Woodhead. And there's like nobody else that really sticks out. And
Yeah.
the Ravens really did a lot of retooling in this draft for their defense, but I really don't see their defense really stopping this offense. I think that they'll definitely get pressure on us and stuff like that. But what, in my opinion, what they really needed to do was put some more weapons around Joe Flacco because he's a quarterback that needs those weapons there. And when the weapons are limited, it's like night or day for him. So we'll probably see some Jeremy Maclin. We'll see some Mike Wallace. Like I said, we'll see some Danny Woodhead, but nobody that's really going to scare you, especially when you compare their offense to the Steelers' offense. Like, even though I hate the Steelers and everything, the Steelers' offense has way more scarier weapons in it than the Ravens. I mean, you're talking about AB. You got Martavius Bryant, excuse me, back this year. You have Le'Veon Bell. You have Jonathan Connor. I mean, you have all of these little wrinkles. They just traded and got Vance McDonald. They just drafted the kid out of USC. They have weapons. They have guys that you're going to have to hone in and focus in on. So I think that we'll be okay. I mean, William Jackson III, Drake Patrick, I don't think that these guys are going to get outclassed or have to really truly worry about these receivers. Macklin is definitely a good receiver, but I think if we key in on him, what else are they going to really do? And what kind of chemistry can Joe Flacco have with the guy that he hasn't even thrown to?
Yeah, and I mean that even deeper than that. Like you're talking about the offensive line, you got a quarterback who's barely 100%. So you knock him out, then you got a backup quarterback who hasn't done anything in the preseason.
Oh my God! So, if we end up going against Ryan Mallett, it's going to be a field day.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's kind of like if our defense can get to the quarterback, really. I mean, it's really in our hands, and our offense, all they have to do is get down the field because I don't really see their defense doing too much for us, and their offense is barely hanging in there.
Right. I totally agree. And like you said, exactly, you made a great point there. I don't know why I didn't even think about that, but Joe Flacco's coming back from a back injury. You're going to throw him in there with a subpar offensive line. Even Mr. B's in the chat says that their offensive line is not good at all. That sounds like you're playing with fire, bro. Like,
why not? Why not sit Joe Flacco out for a few weeks? I mean, whatever. Like, make sure your quarterback that you're paying all this money to is going to be healthy throughout the rest of the season. Don't rush a back injury, and the fact that he has no rhythm with his offensive players. So, I don't think it's worth it. I mean, we're getting
I totally agree.
Ryan Mallett as the backup, so I don't.
Ryan Mallett is trash. Right, I think they said Ryan Mallett threw like 6 interceptions in practice. What do you think is going to happen in real life? But I totally agree with you. Why take the risk? I mean, you've already got 10 guys on IR.
Exactly.
Why risk putting your franchise? Even though I'm not a huge Joe Flacco fan, I think that he gives you the best chance at possible for you guys to have a winning season. Because if Ryan Mallett is your quarterback, bro, you guys might be picking in the top 10. So I agree with G. I don't think you take the risk. I don't think it's worth the risk. It's very early in the season. Yes, it's a divisional game, but
you are paying
this is your quarterback you're talking about.
Way too
right, exactly. You're paying him way too much. He's definitely overpaid. He's hugely overpaid.
And you're gonna put him out there week 1 with a back injury and no playing time with his starting offense. You go Baltimore,
yeah. If they do that, right? Exactly. I wish the Pittsburgh Steelers stopped the same. I wish they did the same kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't imagine that this game. I'm not saying that it's going to be a blowout. I'm not saying that we're going to blow the Baltimore Ravens out. They definitely have talent on defense. They'll definitely give us some headaches. But we do have this guy by the name of Joe Mixon. Number 28.
I'm excited.
Could be starting.
I'm excited to see him.
He could be starting.
I'm really excited to see him play.
Oh, and then let's not forget because there's all this talk. Well, Baltimore retooled. We did all of this. We did that. We grabbed all of these guys. AJ Green is still their daddy. Like until they can do something against him, they don't have an answer for AJ Green. I don't think this guy that they drafted out of Alabama is going to be the answer. I don't think the Chris Carr signing is going to be the answer. They just really what they're going to have to do is focus on AJ Green. And I really don't see them stopping AJ Green. So, and if you guys have paid attention to AJ Green in the preseason, he's still doing AJ Green kind of thing. So.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not really worried about Baltimore. Even though we won't have Vontaze Burfict, I don't think that's going to be a big deal for us.
Not this game.
Right, not this game at all. So, G, is there anything else that we need to talk about? Is there anything that you wanted to share before we get out of here?
No, I mean, regular season is here. Week 1 is upon us. Let's go.
It is upon us. I can't wait. Yeah, this preseason is over, and now we can finally move into the better games. Obviously, we had some bad news, but the good thing is this: John Ross isn't lost for the entire season, and Vontaze Burfict isn't lost for the entire season. And most of the guys that are on IR aren't really going to play that much, so we're in good shape. So as long as we just stay healthy, the offense, like G said, goes up there and scores this year, I think that we're going to be up there with everybody this year. So,
Yeah.
as usual, we'll leave you guys with a who day, all day, every day, and especially on Sunday.
Football's back.